Hello and welcome to Room 442. Shaman, Vatanian and Singh here with you. All right, fellas, today we're talking about Canada's 2022 for the men's team specifically because, let's be honest, they owned the headlines this year with that incredible run to the World Cup, then the World Cup, then some transfers. It all went down a transformative year, I think, for Canadian soccer. We'll get to the World Cup itself later on, but the journey to the World Cup for me almost stole the show, Mikey. The moments and the highlights and just how it felt Canadian football, how we felt as a collective with those wins after wins after wins and moments after moments after moments.
Yeah, that journey is when you sort of start to feel everybody kind of pay attention and really join along for this journey. It's a couple moments along the way that really made it feel like Canada was starting to become a soccer country. And specifically, I'm thinking back to a couple of moments. I know it was in 2021, but towards the end of 2021, the Ice Tekka has to go down as probably the most historic game in Canadian men's national team history, at least here on home soil for sure, just because everything that went on in that game, beating Mexico, was the icing on the cake, but just the overall dramatics around the game, the spectacle of playing a game with our advantage, in snow, freezing cold conditions. You had Sam Adekugbe jumping into the snowbank. That was really special. And then obviously as we turn the calendar and you're looking towards a really impressive January window and qualifying at BMO Field in March, overall just such a remarkable campaign.
Yeah, that January window, beating Honduras, El Salvador, the States, and being without Alphonso Davies for that stretch as well, Albert. I mean, that was the moment I think that at least CONCACAF, if not the world, went, okay, these guys are actually pretty good, and they're probably going to qualify for a World Cup.
Yeah, imagine doing it without your best player, and they didn't. They did it so well. One moment that stands out to me, and it was in 2021 as well, you reminded me, it was in October. It was Alphonso Davies' goal against Panama.
The goal, yeah.
And I was there for that, and not until after did I realize the magnitude of that goal and what it meant. I felt like that moment, I think Canada really caught on to what was happening. Like, this team is actually good. They can make the World Cup. That's what I came out with after that Davies goal. And then the game against the States in Hamilton. The crowd was fantastic.
The crowd was incredible in that game.
The performance, it might have been the performance for them of qualifying. They were so good. And, we talk about so many goals that we've seen so far throughout qualifying for Canada. Then you have the Adekugbe one.
Yeah,
right?
Celebration.
Which I forgot about once again. James brought up, off air, and I'm like, there's so many moments you can't even remember them all, and that's what's so telling, and that's what tells you what a good campaign they had.
Yeah, that Alphonso Davies goal it was against Panama, where he picked up the ball on the right touchline and cut in.
Right on the line.
Such a beautiful goal, but you're right, because I was in the press box for that game, and I remember, it was a big deal for me, and I was sitting beside, shout out Charlie, I was sitting beside him, and we got up, we're like, wow. But then I didn't realize just how the effect that would have on the rest of, I don't want to call them casual supporters, just people who weren't as invested in the game. And that moment there just, it sparked a lot. And then Tim Hortons Field, I was part of the crowd there as well in Tim Hortons Field. And the fact there were flurries coming down, it wasn't, again, in a venue that was traditional for Canada soccer. It was at Tim Hortons Field in Hamilton, Ontario.
It was cold.
No Alphonso Davies.
Parking my car, about 18 blocks away, which you have to come out, right?
Yeah.
But walking towards the stadium, right? And I've been to a lot of football games in Europe over the years, but walking down the street towards the stadium and seeing all the red smoke and hearing the chants, I thought, where am I? This is a proper football experience. And John Hubman said that as well. That was kind of the moment he thought the bus pulls in, all the fans and the smoke and the drums, the flares. And that's the moment he go, wow, this is something very unlike we've seen before. And that, we talk about the Fonzie goal against Panama as maybe being the tipping point. Maybe that was the tipping point for when we got a little step closer to becoming a football culture in Canada.
They followed that up, right, with a really impressive performance.
I was right in the heart of that when that bus came in Hamilton. And I was there at BMO as well for the Jamaica game. And people were crying while the bus was coming in. I've never seen anything like that in Toronto, Ontario.
That was the Flares. That's actually the Flares.
It was the Flares. Yeah, I was the one that was crying. No. You're right though. And going back to that Panama game, I went to the game with two non-soccer fans, and from that day on, they bought in.
Wow.
And now they know the team. They followed the rest of qualification. So a lot of these moments throughout qualifying not only solidified as Canada as one of the nations in CONCACAF and one of the nations in football, but now we have a country that follows the team where it wasn't like that before, at least on the men's side.
Do you remember that Liam Fraser assist
Oh,
to Jonathan
over the
David?
top.
That was in the January window as well. To
That was Liam
Jonathan
Fraser?
David,
Yeah.
pinging that ball to Jonathan David across the back line, coming up with a big 2-0 win in San Pedro Sula.
Yeah.
One of the toughest places
The
historically.
relief. Remember that relief you
Yeah.
felt from that goal being scored because they were kind of up against it at
Yeah.
that point.
And a lot of people say that is also the game that sort of made them believe, because we know how cursed Canada has been going to Honduras. Honduras traditionally is one of the toughest venues in football and CONCACAF to play. And the fact they were able to go down there and get a result, just it exercised so many demons, especially with this Canadian men's national team. That was
8-1's
special.
a long memory.
we
away.
don't have
No
to
one
talk
even
about
talks about
that.
it. That's all anyone talked about for a long
A
time.
long time.
I
Oh
would
yeah,
just
the
bury
haters
that.
love to mention that, right?
Bury that now.
We should mention the Jamaica game as well at BMO Field when they finally qualified for the World Cup. The emotion in the stadium, the noise when that final whistle went there, and in the end it was a straightforward win, really, wasn't it? But that was the relief. This is a relief, I think it was, when that whistle went. Okay, Canada's finally made it, right? Because you always are somewhat questioning, could there be a collapse at some point? What might happen?
Well,
right?
they lost the game before that,
Yeah,
if
they
you
had,
remember,
that's
to
right.
Costa Rica.
Costa Rica,
In
yeah.
Costa Rica, well, we were there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember on the field there and just seeing the reaction of the players and John Herman and the fans, that huge sense of relief that we finally made it was really special as well.
Yeah, I was again in the crowd for that one with the Voyagers. Shout out the Voyagers, and I needed, like, obviously I can get a press pass and I can cover the game, but something inside of me just, I needed to be within that crowd and to really get a sense and feeling of what this game, what this moment would be like. And I got to tell you, like, it was special. You know, usually when you go to Canada soccer games, you don't necessarily see a ton of Canada soccer gear and you see a lot of different things, like Leaf jerseys. I've been to Canada soccer and we see more Leaf jerseys than probably Canada soccer jerseys. It was flooded with Canadian gear, Canadian flags. People understood the magnitude of this moment. You hear levels of conversations about, you know, guys like Junior Hoylett and Tejan Buchanan and Estacio. We never used to be able to have those conversations. You never used to be able to hear that among crowds, right? Now you're starting to see people talk about the squad and not just the moment. Like you're taking it to that next level of fandom, which I thought was really cool to see. And yeah, the moment they qualified and you have guys like Jonathan Osorio carrying the Canadian flag and running over and
Beating the drum.
and
Yeah.
Alistair Johnson, like that was really special.
I was pitch side for that, the celebrations, and I'll never forget John Herdman coming over and hugging members of the media and saying, "We did it." I've never seen that before. I've never seen a coach do that in any sport, and just you're right. It was a complete release, and I'll never forget your mate Craig Forrest seeing him, you know, pitch side doing an interview and just crying.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that says everything right
I remember that video. You said John Herman was asked, "What does this moment mean to
Everything,
you?"
yeah.
Everything.
Yeah, and it wasn't just saying it for the
Everything.
camera. He just truly, you could tell everyone on that team, everyone there, they were just so happy to be there.
It was just pure euphoria.
It was,
It
yeah.
was.
Joy, right? It was amazing sense in that stadium because, you know, there were new fans, obviously, but there were so many fans who have been there, like you
Yeah.
guys, for so many years and have seen the bad
Yeah.
and the ugly and the frustrating and the 8-1, right? And then to finally get past that and finally qualify for a World Cup. So then the World Cup came. How would it happen? How would it pan out? How would they perform? Success? Failure? How was the performances? Guitar was kind of weird, right? Let's get into that, shall we? Right after this. Welcome back to Room 442 as we look back in the past year and how the men's World Cup team performed both through qualifying and through the World Cup. We've done qualifying now. Now to the big show itself. It's been a long time coming, of course. So much anticipation, I guess nerves and stress as well. In the end, 0-3, that they crash out in the group phase. But I think they're left with their heads held high. Some really good performances, certainly some good moments. In particular, Alphonso Davies' first goal for Canada at a World Cup. But looking back, Mikey, would you look at it as a success or a failure?
You know, the longer that we've taken time to step away and sort of dissect what's going on as time moves along, it's starting to feel like it was more of a disappointment than it was a success for this men's national team. And maybe that's a good thing that I'm feeling this way, because maybe that just means expectations are raised, and we're now at the point where I do believe that Canada was good enough to be competing at a FIFA World Cup against teams like Belgium, Croatia, and Morocco. But at the same time, like, you think back, and again, I'll never forget this game. Canada against Belgium. The first game for the Canadian men's national team at a FIFA World Cup in 36 years. And they not only hung with, again, the world number 2 nation, but they not only hung with Belgium, a team that many pegged to go really far in the tournament, but you can come away from that game with a legitimate argument that Canada outplayed Belgium in that game. In that moment, like, I remember just the sense of belief that I had heading into the rest of the tournament. And you follow that up with their start against Croatia and Alphonso Davies' first ever goal. Of course, it's Alphonso Davies scoring the goal after missing a penalty.
Had to be, right?
Had to be. It was poetic.
Yeah.
And then it turned a little sour from that point on. But that being said, the fact that they were able to set the groundwork here at this FIFA World Cup and lining up with the national anthem for 3 really important games for this country, that I'll never forget. And it's a good, like I said, just a good starting point for where we want to go.
And that was Herdman's plan all along. He said it. He goes, this was the foundation, and now we got to build up to the next World Cup. And that's exactly what they did. And I'll classify it as disappointing, because my expectation for them were higher, especially after that Belgium game. I thought, wow, they're really going to bounce back here against Croatia. And they did at the beginning, but then, the class of Croatia shined through. And you can't fault Canada for that. They've never been in that position. I mean, they lost that game to the semifinalists.
Yeah.
Right? Pretty good.
Yeah.
And then Morocco.
2 semi-finalists in
Two
that group.
semi-finalists, exactly. So they put themselves in a great position for the next World Cup. But I just think there could have been more from this team. They should have won that game against Belgium.
I get what you're saying, but at the same point, there's such an unknown entering the tournament as to what this team can do against legitimately good European competition, African competition, because in the last couple of years, you're playing CONCACAF in and out. I know they played Uruguay and Japan in the build-up, but we didn't know what to expect. I had no clue, really. I knew what they could do against CONCACAF opponents. So I was actually quite impressed by what they could do against some really legitimately good teams in moments. But 0-3 didn't surprise me. I mean, I think if you look at our predictions, we all kind of said, well, listen, I mean, I didn't think they'd get out of the group. I forget what you guys said. I thought they might get a point, ideally.
Yeah.
At the very least a goal, which they got. So in that regard, it was a success. But like you said, John Herman nailed it when he says this is about the foundation, preparing for the next World Cup. Because these are, aside from some older players who will move aside, they're a very young team who will still be in their prime when the World Cup comes to North America in 2026. And before then, we got a Gold Cup in 2023.
Yeah, hopefully
we got
Copa America.
Yeah, exactly, Copa America, hopefully. Fingers crossed, right? So a really important tournament. Performers, though, I mean, who stood out to you and who disappointed you?
Yeah, we were having this conversation a lot, and Alphonso Davies, for me, personally, he was the best player for Canada. That being said, he didn't live up to maybe the expectations that he's set for himself by being just such an elite, world-class player day in, day out for Bayern Munich, and even showed flashes of what we saw for this men's national team. But positives, we got to look at a guy like Tajon Buchanan. Tajon is going to be set up for a really big move, large in part to what he showed in the World Cup.
Absolutely.
Because he showcased that he can hang with the world's best, and he can be a dynamic winger or fullback, depending on how teams want to use him. He's very versatile, but he showed up big time in this World Cup. Another guy, Richie Larea, of course, right? Toronto FC
Superb
guy. There was question marks about him heading into this tournament, right? He didn't play great football down the stretch for TFC. He's coming off a month of no football, essentially. But the fact he was able to do what he's done so many different times and just step into this men's national team and make a difference, I think his stock really increased as well.
Yeah, I want to go back to Alphonso Davies. I feel like the expectation for him are extremely high and unfair at times for a left back.
Yeah.
As a left back, you have to be tasked with being the best player on your national team. You have to be tasked with playmaking, scoring goals, and taking penalties. And he missed that penalty, and people got on him for that. I was one of them. But credit for him to even taking the ball and doing that.
Yeah.
Right? Not many players want to do that. I think the expectation for Alphonso Davies, at least in this country, are can be unrealistic, I think, at times.
At the same time,
But he
I
does
thought,
need to be
he
the best
tried
player.
too hard at times. He wasn't bad,
It's
but
probably because of those expectations, James.
I agree. They're unfair, right? And when you are clearly the best player in the team, you feel probably more responsibility to put more on your shoulders. But also at the same time, he's being put at right wing at times,
Yeah.
and central at times, and then left wing at times, then left back at times. There were some criticisms of John Hoban's management of this team in this World Cup. Also, a pretty young manager who has done obviously a fantastic job for Canada on and off the pitch, but probably learnt a lot in this tournament as well. Not least from his comments before the Croatia game, of course. But tactically, was he a little bit found out, do you think?
Yeah, there were times where you know, leading up to this World Cup, we thought John Herman could do no wrong. But then when you face the top level teams, there's no room for error, right? And we saw a little bit of error throughout this World Cup qualifying. And the one game I'm thinking back to is, I believe it's against Croatia, where he left Atiba Hutchinson in for a little bit too long when clearly he was out of his depth there.
But that's Eustachio coming off at halftime.
That was Eustachio coming
Right, so
off halftime.
I get what you're saying,
Yeah, but he
understood it
he
too.
costed Canada 3 out of their 4 goals, I believe. Anyways, it wasn't just Atiba Hutchinson. It was also the way they set up against Croatia, right? It started out well for the game, but they really went with an attacking formation. They decided to bring Kyle Larin back into the lineup and go with 2 strikers up top, and that burned them in the midfield against a team like Croatia, who just dominated the middle of the park. Just little moments like that. John Herman got a little bit exposed, but I will give him credit because he did make adjustments along the way. Some of them were more so positive than negative, and I think overall, yeah, his comments, sure, but I think overall this will be a really big learning process for him, just like it was for a lot of
And that's a
lot of
great point,
players.
because I love how in the media we criticize managers, but we'll look at players and say, well, this player's young, they'll grow, they'll get better. I think coaches can still get better as well.
Yeah.
They can learn their trade. And like Mikey said there, Albert, that was a great opportunity for John Herman to learn his first experience in the Men's World Cup. And I think he'll just get better from it.
And he also said this prior to the World Cup. He goes, this is a learning curve for me. He's like, what a fantastic learning opportunity. I get to rub shoulders with some of the best managers in world football. So that you have to understand that going in. I mean, going back to the Croatia game, that's the one that pops into my mind too. Because obviously you know what the recipe is to kind of hold Croatia. It's to outman them in the midfield. That's something Argentina did, right? You want to have, 4 against 3. And when you don't have that, Modric, Kovacic, Brozovic,
Run the show.
they're going to run the show. And your midfielders aren't at 100%. I think we shouldn't forget that. Stachio wasn't. Atiba was coming off playing how many minutes for
Yeah, I think the
Besiktas?
Eustachio was a huge part.
That was the
Huge.
turning point.
Huge.
That was the turning point for
Right?
his men's national
And
team.
clearly he didn't really trust Piet in there, right? So
So Piet's a great MLS player,
Yeah.
but is he at that level?
No.
Herman didn't think so, clearly.
And as much as we talked about Canada's depth, there's still a lot to go.
A lot to go, yeah. Listen, it's a work in progress. They're a long way from being the finished article.
Right.
They've got 3.5 years to get better. How much better can they get? We're going to find out. When we come back, we'll look at some other topics of interest, from Fonzie to Kone, speaking of the future, Alistair Johnston, of course, and good old Atiba, the greatest warrior that this side's perhaps ever seen. What's his future? Is the one for Canada. Welcome back to room 442. Let's be honest here, as much as there's some good emerging young players with the Canadian teams, some good veterans in this team, no one's bigger than Alphonso Davies, who was the face once again of Canadian soccer on the men's side in 2022, bossing it for Bayern Munich in the Bundesliga. For you, Albert, has he emerged as the best left back in world football? We're seeing at the World Cup, there's some pretty good left backs.
Right.
Theo Hernandez, for example.
Mazraoui. Yes.
But I mean, he has emerged, isn't he? And I don't know what his transfer value is. I'm sure Mikey can tell us that from the transfer market.
I
But
believe it's about 80 million.
80? I think more than that.
Could be more,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Depending on where he goes.
But that's where he is, right? He's top echelon.
Yeah, definitely a top 5 left back. I was looking at the left backs thinking, like, who's there? And I still love Andy Robertson from Liverpool. He's up there. João Cancelo, who can play on either side. But then it has to be him, right? It has to be Alphonso Davies. And when he plays at left back, his best position is when, in my opinion, he's at his best. We just mentioned in the last block for Canada, he plays in multiple positions. But you put him in that left back position, you let him run, you let him defend, you let him use his pace. He can beat players. He can do everything you possibly can think of that a fullback should be able to do. And that's why he should be classed as one of the best left backs in the world. And there's no reason why I don't see him not moving maybe to another big team after Bayern Munich.
You're wrong. You're wrong.
Hmm?
He's not one of the best left backs in the
there we
world.
go.
He's the best left back in the world, hands down at this point.
It's hard to rank, though.
It is hard to rank because they're different types of left backs, but
Yeah.
I think if you slot Alphonso Davies onto any one of those squads, he's going to find a way to make this team overall better.
Oh, he can play for any team in the world.
Any team in the world, of course, but I think he makes this team better by significant margin over any one of those left backs. And not saying those left backs can't slot into a Bayern Munich and do a great job,
Right.
but I just think he raises the overall level of a team more than any other left back in world football will, which is a tough thing to do. If you're a left back, you typically don't impact games in a way that a center back or central midfielder or striker could. Alphonso Davies has shown that he impacts games in that level, in that regard, and he can create plays by himself. I don't think a lot of those guys that you mentioned are necessarily creating plays by themselves aside from, spraying a pass. Alphonso Davies does it every which way.
I mean, that's tough to say. If you look at João Cancelo, he could do it all, right? He can score goals. At one point, we were talking about him being the best left back in the Premier League. This is not me against
It depends
Alphonso.
also what what a left back you think a left back should be doing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
If he defend as well, there's probably better defensive left backs than Fonzie, but there's very few better attacking left backs than Fonzie. He's very good. Let's leave it at that.
I always thought of him like a Gareth Bale, to be honest. Gareth Bale started off as a left back.
He did, yeah, absolutely.
Right? And Fonzie is showing that he can score goals. So there's no reason why
it's
maybe in the near
also-
future he becomes an attacking
It's
player.
also you love his pace back there. How many times have you guys seen clips or watched Bayern and he's the one that's
He can
tracking,
make up
like,
for
chasing
mistakes.
down?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
You love that back there.
Maybe he should take up golf. He can be just like Gareth Bale. Very quickly, Ishmael Kone.
Wow.
He makes the move to Watford, of course, from Montreal. Big loss for Montreal, of course. Albert, I'll start with you here very quickly. Kone, future, can he be a star in the top flight in European football?
I still think there's a big learning curve for him. I think as we saw at the World Cup, he was good, but there are moments of, I don't know if it's like lapses in concentration, if it's just like some sort of nervousness playing at the top level. But I feel like this is a great fit. You go to the championship, you're on a good team, a team that plays attacking football, so it's going to play to his style. I think he can become that, but it's not going to be relatively soon.
Mikey, on the other, spectrum from Kone, maybe his long-term replacement was going to be Atiba Hutchinson. Atiba, 39 years old, had the World Cup. He's still at Besiktas at time of taping right now. Very quickly, what is Atiba's future? I'm assuming he'll retire or maybe get a farewell match perhaps at BMO Field, which would be very fitting, I think.
Yeah, with this men's national team, I mean, okay, well, we can't ever rule Atiba off or write
No,
Atiba
of course
off,
not.
right? You always think, like, maybe now's the time he's going to hang it up, but he still finds a way to keep going. I can't imagine him sticking around for another cycle. And if he's not going to stick around for the full cycle, then you got to imagine that he's gonna probably hang it up. That's where I'm leaning towards it, but at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if Atiba,
Yeah, I know.
Atiba sticks around.
You never know, right? I mean,
Yeah,
what a
he's in great
servant he's
shape.
been. You know, you hope there's some capacity when he retires, he'll stick with the program, from an ambassadorial role to a coaching role, something, because you need more Atiba in Canadian soccer. That is for sure. Alex Johnson, honest with this Glasgow Celtic. The boys get a good one there. So tenacious, he'll fit in beautifully. We're out of time. I would love to talk for hours about this right now, but we'll do that in the new year in room 442. Hope you enjoyed that. It's been a pretty good year for the men's team in the World Cup qualifying, of course, Qatar 2022.